welcome back to my channel. My name's Cheyenne and I am currently a second year vet student. Today I want to talk about 5 things that you should know before going into vet med. Obviously this isn't a comprehensive list by any means, but I feel like these are really important topics that aren't always talked about as much. Granted, some of these things have been gaining more exposure, however I just really want to come and talk about them myself and give my perspective on them. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and feel free to drop any questions or comments down below. And I just want to preface things by saying I do have some notes on my phone, so please forgive me if I have to look down from time to time. But with that being said, let's go ahead and just jump right into the video. So the first thing that you should know is that vet med is an extremely competitive field. In the US, there are only about 30 or so AVMA accredited schools, so that obviously severely limits the number of seats that are available for any given applicant. Every year there are thousands of students that apply and are waitlisted or rejected and they have to try again. So if vet med is something that you're really passionate about and really interested in pursuing, you have to ask yourself, are you okay with potentially not getting in on your first try? Are you okay with reapplying and, trying again? That was something that I had to, sit down and figure out. If I don't get in on my first try, what will I do? And there are plenty of things you can do if you do decide to reapply. If you're rejected after your first year, you can continue to gain more experience, work at different hospitals in different practices, and kind of diversify your experiences. But just know that that is something that comes with applying to vet school. The next thing that I want to talk about is the debt to income ratio and the cost of attendance. So the debt to income ratio for vet students consistently exceeds 2 to 1. And so what that means is that for most students that graduate from vet school, their debt is 2 times what their starting income is. So obviously you can imagine that is a very big commitment to take on. According to the AVMA website, for the class of 2019, the average debt for vet students hovered around $150,000 and ranged from no debt to $400,000. So there's a lot of variability in that number. I think when I graduate, I'll be somewhere in that 150 to 160 ballpark, and that's about the average for a lot of students. There's a lot of factors that go into this. If you choose to go in-state, if you even have an in-state vet school, what your financial situation is coming into vet school, if you have any debt from undergrad, etc., etc. So a lot of things to think about. If you're fortunate enough to have the funds to just pay for vet school outright, that's awesome. But if you're not and you have to take out loans like a lot of us, then that's something that you really have to consider. And I think that loans and debt are things that a lot of people don't really think about too much. It's like, okay, yeah, I'll sign up for this and I'll worry about it later. But the reality is that debt is very real and it's something that will follow you for many years after you graduate. And so I will link the website, the AVMA website, down below because there are some other key points that seem a bit more hopeful, but the main point is that vet school is very expensive. The third point that I want to touch on is the rigor and commitment of vet school. So if you saw one of my previous videos where I reflected on my first year, then you definitely know that I am a huge advocate of self-care and making time for yourself and having fun outside of vet school. I think that that is key and that is what helps keep you sane because vet school can get kind of crazy sometimes, but it can be difficult. When you're taking exams nearly every week and you have various assignments, quizzes, etc. interspersed in between, you're in school for 8 hours a day, you have labs that drag on for hours, especially first year. Gross anatomy lab can be brutal sometimes. It's a lot to balance and it can be difficult. So yes, it is doable, but at the end of the day, you are a full-time graduate student training to become a medically licensed professional. So it's not easy by any means, and although these instances aren't the norm, there have been cases where students have dropped out of vet school, they've been dismissed from the program, and had to wait a whole year to repeat classes. So, it's not something to take lightly. I don't want this to sound too scary or anything because it's manageable. I do it, a lot of people do it, but it is something to take seriously. So next up, I want to talk about emotional distress because this can be a very stressful career that a lot of us are choosing. From burnout, compassion fatigue, when you're actually practicing, dealing with difficult clients some of whom might think that you're only in it for the money, who are questioning why things are so expensive, which, just to touch on that, insurance is not a very highly regulated normal thing in vet med. It should be. A lot of people should put your pets on insurance because you can't predict the future. You don't know what might happen. But we use a lot of expensive equipment that is the same grade as what human doctors use, except we don't have, highly regulated insurance to cut costs on things that animals have to come in for. So just to add that in there. But yeah, going back to emotional distress, having to put down animals that you've known for years, that you've bonded with, and you formed a relationship with both the pet and the client. Obviously, that's never going to be easy, but euthanasia is a very real and important part of our job. And, I could talk about this all day long, but before I get too emotional, I just want to point you in the direction of a TED Talk that I watched a few months ago. It was great. It was by Dr. Melanie Bowden, and she does a really great job of just expressing the emotional distress and burdens that come with this field. So definitely recommend that you go and watch that. So finally, and perhaps most seriously, I wanted to touch on suicide rates in the veterinary profession. This is something that is thankfully being talked about more and more. When I started vet school my first year, they made sure that we had a lot of resources, people that we could reach out to, counseling, etc. Because truly there is a disproportionately high suicide rate in this career. The CDC conducted a study where they found that male veterinarians were 2.1 times as likely and female veterinarians were 3.5 times as likely to die from suicide compared to the general population. So obviously there is something going on in our profession, and I believe that I touched on a few of those points, high income to debt ratio, feeling like you're drowning in debt, like you're never going to get out of debt, emotional stress and burnout. All of these are factors that contribute to this disproportionately high suicide rate in the vet med profession. It is a really hard field to be in, and if you are going to go into vet med, you have to try your best to prioritize mental health. Obviously, every day is not going to be perfect. You're gonna have hard days. That's just a reality. But you have to put in the work to make sure that you are taking care of yourself the best that you can. Obviously, it's not easy. I know firsthand how difficult it can be, and I'm only a student. There have been times that I have struggled with anxiety and depression and stress, and being in vet school, it feels like it's a constant, we're in a constant state of stress, and it's hard. It's really hard, but I think figuring out how to move away from vet school, move away from your job, and just take time for yourself. Reach out to people that are close to you, that love you, talk to people, and get help that you need. Make sure you have hobbies and things to do outside of the vet med profession, and really just do your best to prioritize your mental health. And also there is this awesome mental health group called Not One More Vet, and they are basically like a mental health support group. It's a giant community of veterinarians that understand what you're going through, and so communities like this are awesome, and they exist to help those in our profession, and I feel like they should absolutely be utilized. So know that there are resources out there for you. So I know this might have been a bit of a depressing video, and I don't say these things to discourage anyone or to say that this profession is bad. Obviously, I love it. That's why I'm doing it. But I think that people who are going into vet med deserve to know the realities of this profession. Some of these things are things that I wish I had known going into the field when I started pursuing vet med, 5-6 years ago, whatever. Do I think that it would have changed my trajectory? No, I think I would have, pursued this career anyway. But I think it's only fair that people know what they're getting into and what they're signing up for. Obviously, that's why vet schools want you to have a lot of experience coming in. That's why they make it mandatory that you have animal experience and veterinary experience when you apply through VMCAS. But just as a heads up from someone who didn't know any of these things really before I was about to enter my first year of vet school, I just wanted to touch on some of them. So, I just wanted to briefly talk about these things. Obviously, I could go on for days about any one of these topics, but I think that these are 5 things that are important for anyone to know who wants to go into vet med. So if you have any more questions or comments or want me to expand on anything, please let me know. Drop a comment down below and I'd be happy to do so. And yeah, I think next up I'll be talking about how to get into vet school. So Hopefully this video didn't discourage you too much, and if you're interested in learning how I got into vet school and what tips and advice I have, be sure to look out for that video. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye!